Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today we're going to be doing a short tutorial on how to paint a Black Legion Obliterator. Now the first colour that we're going to use is Citadel Mephiston Red. So we're going to be using this to do his loincloth and the coils from his plasma gun, as well as all the little joints between his armour and the flesh, and any gaps where it's sort of pulling apart on his back. The reason I do this as one of the first colours is just because it's easier to paint this in and then do the skin around it rather than doing the skin and having to poke around inside the wounds and things with the red. When we come back, we'll have all the Mephiston Red finished. You can see there where we've put all the red around all the joints on the front there and around the back. Now we're going to be moving on to Citadel Liberator Gold, and this is going to be to do all the gold trim on his armour. Now it's worth taking care while you're doing this gold trim, just gently putting it on around the edges of each section, trying to cover every area without going into the black too much. We will be putting the black back on once we finish the gold, but if you can avoid it, then do so. When we come back, we'll have all the Liberator Gold finished. Next we're using Vallejo Model Air Chrome. This is going to be just the tubing on his head, and also the metal tubing that runs through the fleshy tubes that are around his body, that run from his back to his arms, and then there's a couple going around his side as well. And it's just the sections that are inside these fleshy tubes. When we come back, we'll have all the Model Air Chrome finished. Next we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Retributor armour. This is going to be to paint the Chaos symbol on his arm, the bullet casings that run through his back and underneath his arm, and also the sections of piston just behind his legs. When we come back, we'll have all the Retributor armour finished. Next we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Leadbelcher. As with all the models, I use this as the darker metallic on all the Chaos stuff, just because it gives them that grim and gritty look once you've washed it with a bit of Nuln Oil. When we come back, we'll have all the Leadbelcher finished. The next colour is going to be Vallejo Flesh Base. I'm going to use this to do all the skin on the model. Now the skin is one of the longest things to paint on the model. It covers quite a bit of area and there is quite a bit of detail to it, so once you finish this base layer, we're going to be doing another few layers once we've shaded it, and the whole skin does take probably the majority of time that you'll spend on the model. It is worth the effort though, because it does look good once it's finished. When we come back, we'll have all the flesh base finished. Next we're moving on to Vallejo Dark Flesh. This is just another skin colour that we're going to use to do all the little tubes that are around his body. When we come back, we'll have all the dark flesh finished. Now we're going on to Citadel Rakarth Flesh. This is going to be to do any of the skulls and the bony protrusions. Now as the model goes on, you'll notice that I do miss off some of the teeth, and the little bits of bone are scattered around because there's tons of these little teeth all over his armour. So if you do get to a point later on in the model where you find something that you've missed, just paint them up then. When we come back, we'll have all the Rakarth flesh finished. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Averland Sunset. It's going to be to do a few of the tubes and the Eye of Horus on the front of his knee there. When we come back, we'll have all the Averland Sunset finished. Just give you a quick rotation to show you where we're up to so far. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of Vallejo White to do a few of the little details. I'll paint the inside of these parts white. I'm just going to use a little bit of Fugan Orange and Cassandora Yellow just to give that a bit of a glow inside. It's nothing too special, it's just to break up the colour. We'll start by giving them a nice even coat of white inside. When we come back, we'll have all of the white finished. Next we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo Beige Brown. It's just going to be to do the string that holds the skull on his waist. Like so. Now we're going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel Emperor's Children, and this is just to do the tiny little tongue that's protruding from his side. Like so. Moving on to the shades now, we're going to start by using Citadel Nuln Oil. I'm going to use that on all the silvery parts of the weapons, and also all the silver parts of tubing. When we come back, we'll have all of the Nuln Oil finished. Now we're going to be using some Citadel Agrax Earthshade. Going to be using this on all of the golds and the browns. That's just to give the gold its first layer of grime. Now with this you do want to put a little bit more than you usually would, just so that it pools on the gold. You want a few little spots of darker shade on those gold areas. When we come back, we'll have all of the Agrax Earthshade finished. Now here I've failed to show you what paint I'm using. We're actually using the Citadel shade Druchii Violet. I'm going to be using this on all of the reds, like his loincloth and all the wounds on his back. I'll just give you a show of the paint now, just in case you can't understand me when I talk. We have Druchii Violet. There is a lot of wounds on his back, so be careful when you're doing them so you don't get the purple all over the skin. We will be going over that skin at some point anyway, but it's easier if you don't. Next we're going to be using Citadel Reikland Flesh Shade. Now this is a great shade to use on his skin because it's slightly a browny red colour And so when we're making the wounds look sore with a little bit of caribou crimson later, it helps with that because the skin's already got that slight red tinge to it. Like so. Now we're going on to Citadel Seraphim Sepia. We're going to be using this on all of the bone colours. When we come back, we'll have all of that finished. Now just a little bit of Cassandora yellow is going on. This is just to fill in the little gaps where we put the white on his fist there, and also these three sections on top. Like so. Now we're going to be using some Fugan orange. This is going to be the little bits at the top there. Paint it around the bottom so it looks like the top's glowing a little bit. Also shading the eye for us. And a few of the yellow wires. Like so. Now we're going to be using a tiny little bit of caribou crimson, and this is just to shade the tongue. Returning now to Nuln Oil, I'm going to put the second layer of shade onto the gold. Now just doing this on the Liberator gold areas to trim to his armour. And again, like the Agrax Earthshade prior to this, you want to be letting it pool up a little bit in certain areas so it darkens them up. When we come back, we'll have all of the Nuln Oil finished. Now we're just moving on to a little bit of Vallejo flesh base to recolour his skin. Now when you're doing this, be careful to leave some of the Reikland flesh shade in the recesses. Like so. Now we've just added some Citadel Deepkin flesh to the flesh base. Now we're just going to start highlighting the skin. Now as always, I'm trying to highlight the skin so it'd only be the ridges and the skin on top which would catch the most light. So that's the areas that you want to be highlighting more. When we come back, we'll have all of this highlight finished. Next we've added a further amount of Deepkin flesh to the previous mix. We're just going to do exactly the same, highlighting all the tops of the skin, leaving some of the previous colours shown beneath. When we come back, we'll have all this mix finished. Moving on to Citadel Liberator Gold to go back to the trim now. When you're reapplying the Liberator gold, you want to be making it so that it's slightly thicker than just an edge highlight on all the trim. So any bits that you think could catch the light, put more Liberator gold on there. Leaving plenty of the shades in the recesses and around any bolts or any areas where you've made it cool. When we come back, we'll have all of the Liberator gold finished. Now we're just going to add a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome to the Liberator gold, just to give it one really light highlight. As I said before, when you add the chrome to it, it does lighten up the gold a lot, and it gives it a nice shine because the chrome is such a shiny colour. It really does make all the trim and stuff like that stand out if you're painting on the edges and on the bolts and a few sections where there's quite a bit of the Liberator gold on it. When we come back, we'll have all of this highlight finished. Now we're going to be using Citadel Retributor Armour to go over and highlight some of those areas where we used Retributor Armour and shaded before. I'm only reapplying this to areas that would catch the light if the light was shining down from above. When we come back, we'll have all of the Retributor armour finished. Next we're going to be using Citadel Liberator Gold again, and this is to highlight the areas that we've just used Retributor armour on. And once again we're adding a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome to the Liberator Gold. We're just going to highlight these parts in a similar way to the way we did the gold trim before. When we come back, we'll have all the highlights finished. Next we're going to be using Vallejo Dark Flesh, and this to reapply some colour to the tubes. Now when you're doing this, be sure to leave any shade in the recesses as you paint along. So any creases in them or little ridges, make sure you leave a little bit of the shade around them. When we come back, we'll have all of the dark flesh finished. Now we've just added a little bit of white to the dark flesh, and we're now going to highlight that. When we come back, we'll have all of this highlight finished. Now we're just going to be working on the black armour. So using Vallejo Black, just going to be filling in all the panels so they're all a nice, even, smooth black. Now be careful when you're going around the gold. Take extra care not to put any of the black onto the gold again. When we come back, we'll have all of the black finished. Next up, we're going to be using Vallejo German Grey. Now this colour I always rave about, so I won't in this one. Suffice to say, it's a great colour to highlight black. When we come back, we'll have all of the German grey finished. Now we're moving on to Citadel Mechanicus standard grey, and this is going to be to highlight some of the ridges and the breaks in his armour. When we come back, we'll have all the Mechanicus standard grey finished. Now using Citadel Rakarth flesh, we're going to start building up the colours on all the bone and the claws. So with Rakarth flesh you want to be leaving some of the Seraphim Sepia shade in all the recesses, and also trying to build up that darker bone colour. When we come back, we'll have all of the Rakarth flesh finished. Now we're adding some Citadel Ushabti bone to the Rakarth flesh. We're just going to highlight all of the claws and the bones. When we come back, we'll have all of that mix finished. Now we're just adding a little bit of white to the previous mix to lighten it up, and this is going to be for the final highlight on all of the bone and the teeth. Like so. Now we're moving on to Citadel Mephiston Red. We're going to start reapplying the colour to his loincloth, and the coils on the plasma gun, and his eye lens. When we come back, we'll have all of Mephiston Red finished. I've just added a little bit of white to that to give it more of a pink colour. Now I'm going to work on the eye lens and do the first highlight on the left hand side of the lens. Add a little bit more white, do the next highlight a little bit further over. And of course do the final highlight, which is going to be a white spot just near the front, one at the back. And we're just going to tidy up that lens with a little spot of black and just draw that across the top of the lens, like so. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of Fire Dragon Bright to the Mephiston Red and start to highlight the loincloth and the plasma coils. Now when you highlight them, you want to be keeping the highlights to the raised areas of the cloth. So the bits where the ripples are sticking out furthest, highlight those parts. Also any parts that you feel will be catching the light if the light was shining down from above. When we come back, we'll have all of this mix finished. I'm just going to add more Fire Dragon Bright to the previous mix. This is going to be to do the plasma coils and also the loincloth. When we come back, we'll have all of these highlights finished. And we're just going to add a little bit more Fire Dragon Bright to the mix. So it's really bright orange, this one. Now we're just going to highlight the edges of the loincloth and around the bottom of the loincloth and around the bottom of any holes that are in it as well. It's just to do one final little highlight on the very edges, just where it catches the light a little bit more. Like so. So now we're just going to work on the plasma coils momentarily. We've added a little bit more Fire Dragon Bright to the mix. We're just highlighting those a little bit more, make the coils look a bit more orange. Now we're going to add a little bit of white to the mix and just do one final highlight on the very edges of the plasma coils. Like so. Next we're just going to use a little bit of Fugan Orange. This is just going to be to add a little bit more of a fiery colour to the arrow-headed splits that are running down the side of his power glove there. Now we're going on to Vallejo Beige Brown again. Once more, this is just to do the string, making sure you leave a little bit of the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. Next up is a little bit of Citadel Averland Sunset. And we're going to be doing all the little yellow tubes that we shaded with Fugan Orange earlier on. Like so. Next up is Vallejo Black. And we're just going to be doing some stripes, like chevrons, on the yellow wires. Like so. Now using a little bit of Citadel Mephiston Red, we're just going to highlight the inside of that mouth, which is sort of on the front of the plasma gun. Like so. And the final thing that we're going to use is a little bit of Citadel Caribou Crimson. And we're going to be going around the edges of all the areas where there's tubes going into the skin and the metal joints which are in his skin, sort of where the weapon's mounted on his shoulder and on his hips and his knees. Basically any area where the flesh is broken, you want to be using this Caribou Crimson just to go around it and give it a kind of angry and inflamed look. So there's a little bit of infection going on there. Like so. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.